Helen was a blonde and Logan was a brunette. They loved each other very much, and 2 years after they were married, they had a daughter. The birth was complicated, double cord entanglement. So right after the birth, the baby girl was taken to the neonatal intensive care unit. When Helen was able to see her daughter for the first time 2 days later, she was a little numb with surprise. In front of her was a little red-headed girl with long curly hair. "Excuse me, are you sure you didn't get the baby mixed up?" asked Helen timidly. "It's your baby. It's out of the question that we could have mixed someone up. Besides, your daughter was the only one on the ward these days," the nurse explained, and before she left, said that the baby's father was probably a redhead. Helen looked at her daughter for a long time and could not believe her eyes. Baby, meanwhile, began to scream louder and louder and calmed down only when Helen held her to her breast. When Logan saw his daughter for the first time, he was also stunned, but nevertheless did not say a word. At home they began to study their family tree, called parents, asked, and it turned out that Logan's great-great-grandmother, on her father's side, was very red-haired and curly. After her, no one was born red-headed, only brunettes were born, like Logan himself. The girl was named Charlotte, and she grew up to be a very cheerful girl. When she was 4 years old, in the spring, she got her first freckles on her nose. "Mommy, what is it?" she asked naively. "Freckles. Angels have them, and you have to help as many people as how many freckles you have," Helen thought up, kissing her daughter lovingly on the cheek. She could not even suspect that Charlotte took her words seriously and remembered for the rest of her life. When the girl was playing in the sandbox and one of the kids nearby was crying, she, abandoning her constructed sandcastles, was running to soothe the crying child. She stroked her hands on the hair, said little kid-soothing words, sang affectionate songs. It had an instant effect on the children, and they always stopped crying, and Charlotte became more and more convinced that she was really an angel. If she saw that some little child, seeing a doll in her hands, began to be capricious and beg their parents for it, she ran to the child and gave her favourite doll. When Charlotte usually came home, the doll was in its place, and she had no idea what efforts Helen and the mother of the child made to return the doll, and Charlotte thought that this was how it was supposed to happen, because she was an angel. When Charlotte was 10 years old, on her way back from school, she saw an elderly man on the sidewalk, who began to slowly bend over to tie a shoelace. As she got closer, the girl noticed over the man a little boy on the balcony who was trying to get a look at the street. At that moment, he inadvertently elbowed a large pot of petunias, and the pot flew downward. Charlotte didn't even have time to shout, but simply pushed the elderly man as hard as she could. The man, unable to stay on his feet, flew aside, and Charlotte fell on top of him. Before he could think of anything, a huge pot of petunias landed right where the elderly man was tying his shoelaces and shattered to pieces. The man's emotions of anger and resentment were quickly replaced by emotions of tenderness and gratitude. "Dear, you're just an angel. You saved me from death," said the stunned man, and these words even more convinced the little girl. Every spring she got more freckles on her nose. One day, standing in front of the mirror, she scrutinized herself. Cheerful, red curls, big blue eyes, scarlet lips, and new freckles on her upturned nose. Looking at herself, she asked seriously, "Mom, where am I going to find so many unhappy people waiting for my help?" Having completely forgotten what she had said years ago, Helen asked in surprise, "Daughter, what are you talking about? I can't understand you." "Well, look at my nose. How many freckles there are. And every spring there are more. That means more people are showing up that I have to help." Daughter, your freckles mean that the sun loves you and kisses you every time. Each new freckle is a kiss from the sun. Helen tried to explain to her daughter, still not fully understanding her words. You know, Mom, sunshine might kiss me, but I remember you told me that I was an angel and that every freckle was a person I had to help, insisted Charlotte. Then Helen remembered everything, looked stunned at her daughter, hugged her and thought, it's impossible for a child to remember what she was told at the age of 4. Without hiding her surprise, the mother said affectionately, My darling, you really are an angel, and hugged her daughter even tighter, kissing her on the golden head. As a teenager, Charlotte was sure to help the elderly cross the road, carry the grocery bags home. She always had some candy in her backpack in case she saw a crying baby. And then one day, another strange thing happened. Charlotte was walking down the street and was overtaken by a gorgeous woman. She was dressed in an expensive suit and was followed by a plume of an unusual, fabulous fragrance. The woman overtook Charlotte and began to approach the no less luxurious Lexus. Charlotte really wanted to know what kind of perfume she was wearing. She couldn't feel comfortable just coming up and asking, because she thought it was beyond ignorant. When the woman opened the car with the key and was about to open the door, Charlotte, in a surprise to herself, and not understanding where she got that courage, touched the woman's sleeve. The woman turned around and said indignantly, What do you think you're doing, young lady? Excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me, but you have a wonderful magical smell of your perfume, and I just wanted to know. She didn't have time to finish, because at the same second they heard the screeching of brakes and saw a car coming toward them. They managed to bounce a few meters away from the car, and that saved them. All that was left of the front driver's door was the shattered metal. The steering wheel was twisted, and the driver's seat flew off towards the passenger seat. The woman hugged Charlotte and whispered frightenedly in her ear, You're an angel. You are my angel. Growing up, Charlotte met a guy. It was already deep autumn. It was drizzling rain or snow. Hiding her hair under a hat, Charlotte stood in front of the subway entrance, wondering whether to take the subway or the trolley. Just then she heard from behind her, Excuse me, could you please tell me how I can get to the train station? When she turned around, she saw a guy with the same golden hair. His red curly hair was already soaked in the rain, and even though it was already autumn, his freckles on his nose shone spring. Only his eyes were brown. When she saw him, she couldn't help herself and started laughing out loud. He looked at her confusedly, feeling awkward. Then she took off her hat without stopping to laugh. When he saw her, he couldn't hold back his laughter either. They stood and laughed in either drizzling rain or snow. 2 years later, they had a wonderful curly-haired, red-haired baby boy. When he was 4 years old, he got freckles on his nose, and he asked, Mommy, what is that? And Charlotte answered, Freckles, and angels have them. And you have to help as many people as how many freckles you have.